And here's this week's installment of Ezekiel Kralen's story about the two little dogs, Flacco and Lucky, although it's mostly lately about the legal machinations of the various parties involved in trying to get Ezekiel evicted. I'm not sure how much of that has been diffused by the time we get to the point where we are now, which is April 22nd in the story. Last April, of course, every little endorphin boost counts, part 1 of 2, Ezekiel Kralen wrote. Email correspondence, April 22nd, backtracking 5 days from last week's narration because I slipped up. And this passage is so important, it changed my world forever and for the better. Subject, brilliant, so glad I went. Date, April 22nd. Boy howdy, did this piece take gobs longer to compose than I anticipated. I relived many times over every precious little scene in this fast-paced act before placing fingers to keyboard. Then I cautiously reworked each sentence like a wire sculptor, struggling with complicated twists and turns on a diminutive piece nonetheless intended to convey a labyrinth of ideas. Oh, what a glorious travail! I know this sounds plebeian, but I rose up from my chair and danced to Santana's Maria, Maria in sporadic bursts of ecstasy before returning to my station. Often just part of a sentence, a phrase, would stop me dead in my tracks, and I'd have to mull it over for quite some time. So please enjoy the copious revelations I now fling unto your world, good physician, like gold leaf origami cranes, swirling down to you from way on high. Scene 1, the arrival. LARC consultation was spectacular, but before I get to that part, let me tell you, Watson, it was quite a lovely day weather-wise, but also people-wise, as the line of folks waiting for the doors to open were a multicultural rainbow of soft-spoken, genial human beings. I think I found my spiritual family. I felt right at home, like some kind of coffee clatch among dear friends. I should hang out there more often. Well, that would be weird. It just might work, especially if I brought him a few pink boxes of glazed treats from the donut shop on the opposite corner. I hear that shop gets rough at night sometimes. But what should one expect? After all, this is part of the Tenderloin, albeit right on the edge of budding Market Street. Beautiful day while waiting in line for free legal counsel by one of the many superb attorneys at LARC, Legal Advice and Referral Clinic, at the UC Hastings Cotchett Law Center, 333 Golden Gate Avenue, which is close to the Civic Center here in San Francisco. The voice you hear is the fellow in line right behind me. Seems to have his act really together. I'd love to know why he's here. Alas, I doubt I ever will. The uniformed guard, a short Filipino dude with a pearly grin, guided today's clients inside in batches of 3 or 4. As I entered through the gate, I raised a black COVID mask that hung from my neck to cover the span from nose to chin, so it now hugged my face like a space alien neonate. Though optional and hardly anyone else wore one, I thought it best in my case, thanks to geriatric horse hockey. I had to walk up a wide concrete ramp about 30 feet in length where a plump, sweet lady in the last of her middle years awaited each visitor at the top. She sat by herself behind a long folding table with a matte brown surface and appeared much like that fairy godmother in Disney's Cinderella, awash in radiance, for the sun had managed to squeeze a juicy beam of light through the gap between buildings from way overhead. She greeted me with a smile and handed me a card which she called a ticket. There was a thin, flexible square of white plastic, wider than my palm. It had a large black number on it. Mine was 20. She also handed me 3 sheets of paper, 2 of which were stapled together and tinted green. That was the intake form. The single sheet was white, a simple questionnaire for the client to describe how satisfied they were with their service and, if not, in what ways they could improve. Godmother then brandished her pencil like a magic wand, directing me to enter the building and turn immediately right and down the stairs. As I descended to the lower level, I observed and appreciated the clean modern interior of chrome and concrete and how invigorating the air felt in my lungs. HEPA filters, perhaps. A disturbingly elongated fellow of tender age, gaunt as a praying mantis, stood on the landing between the upper and lower flights. He smiled and waved me on, sharp left down the lower flight of stairs and into a conference room. Folding tables were aligned in 5 rows of 6 each, with ample space between. The place was abuzz with intake workers, attorneys, and clients, a soft, amiable murmur thanks to superb acoustic rendered by a thick carpet stretching wall to wall. It was a blend of nubby material in orange, brown, and pitch, and felt somewhat plush underfoot. The colors reminded me of Halloween or Thanksgiving, when leaves are falling in bright post-mortem hues to embed themselves in storm-drenched loam. Scene 2. The Revelation. Another lanky, auburn-haired usher, taller than Arwen, escorted me to a cushioned metal chair right beside that fellow who stood behind me in the queue outside. He was a dark-skinned POC with a rugged build. His thickly matted hair sported dreadlocks plastered together in a fat braid that sprang from the center of his scalp and lay pressed upon his left side, down to the jawline. I have absolutely no idea the fashion statement behind that, but I'm sure it's packed with reggae lore, along with wads of moistened clay. Nonetheless, it looked good on him. Looking about the room, I noticed an intake agent or attorney here and there, sitting alone at a table, talking to themselves. But upon a more prolonged observation, I realized they were conversing with a client or applicant via Zoom interface on a laptop or on a smartphone hidden by a cupped hand or long draping locks of hair. But I also noticed something else going on that was far more curious. Everyone was smiling, laughing, holding mini powwows across the conference room. Not a single tear, frown, or rage-filled tantrum from any of the walk-ins. More like a jubilant family reunion than folks besieged by rapacious landlords, violent spouses, crippling medical fees beyond the stratosphere, missing, abused, or deathly ill children, homes destroyed by fire, or whatever other horror American life cooks up for the poor and the destitute. I watched the assistants and attorneys move about from one table to another, sitting down to discuss their clients' troubles, then summoning the next postulant. 20 or so minutes later, busy but not flustered, they radiated a humble joy in doing so much good for so many. Their compassion, mutual respect for those less fortunate, and stunning dedication was contagious, infecting each applicant with newfound inspiration, pride, and the spirit of victory preordained. Truly one big happy family, spontaneously brought together once each month for 2 hours. Strangers only on the surface, and then an amazing realization rippled through every fiber of my soul. They know something I don't, or didn't until now. You can't crush these people. No one can. And with that epiphany, the tiny ghost of Terry Pterodactyl appeared on my shoulder and whispered, "Well, it certainly looks like you've come to the right place this time around, Mr. Zeke." Upon hearing that, I took a deep, relaxing breath, expelling the last of my anxieties from the lawsuit that had been lingering for some days now. "Begone, ye divils!" knowing that indeed I was in the right place, for this was all a staged scenario by Bodhisattva guardians for the benefit of yours truly. Each actor, whether walk-in, agent, or attorney, knew their place, their role, and their lines to a T before appearing on stage. In fact, most were simply extras or NPC, non-playing characters, as they're called in the digital world. Background filter creating the illusion of conversational hum and an air of getting things accomplished with noble efficiency. So, this is nirvana, I thought to myself, made to order for yours truly. I'm telling you, Watson, I was most eager to tread the boards myself and impress them with my own thespian precocity. So by the time someone called out 20, and I was seated before my assigned agent, when she said, "Now let's look into your case and see how we can help," I replied, "It's an honor," and slapped card number 20 face up on the table for the win, along with that 2-page intake form. For if I believe in anything, it's my own bedraggled self. Just the arrangement of pixels at that point keeps the F very far away from the O, and I thought it was a separate word like F. Scene 3, the intake angel. My agent was all of 4'9" and appeared very young, like a 14-year-old. But get this, she was the spitting image of my eviction attorney, blonde hair and all, just a smaller version, who even spoke with the same Dutch accent. After asking all the standard questions, preferred language, ethnic identity, pronoun preference, etc., she asked me to sign and date it. As I wrote my name down, she exclaimed, "Ezekiel, what a nice name you have." "Flattery will get you nowhere with me, dear," I replied with a grin, though not apparent through the mask. "You hardly hear that name any more," she softly mused. "Well, it does roll off the tongue nicely," I agreed, "but it's not my birth name. I changed it way back in '96 to divorce myself from my family." "I suppose such things are necessary sometimes," she sighed, and then said, "Now tell me, why are you here today so I can expedite your case?" I then presented a quick rundown of the lawsuit, why the charges are so egregious, because false, grossly exaggerated, and or opinionated rather than factual, and even though I am judgment-proof, I don't want to have such baseless accusations go on record that could lead to a second attempt by the landlord to evict me, and I need help figuring out which forms to use, how to fill them out and deliver them, because I could not find an attorney who'd take my case, which latter point got me on a roll about my disappointing outcome with the San Francisco Bar Association. Well, there was certainly a lot to take in, I admit, so I can't blame her when she twisted her brow in confusion and queried, "So you want me to help you sue the SF Bar Association?" Sidebar. Now, mind you, Watson, this is a theatrical performance, not a real-life scenario. So I doubt she thought that really was the case, but merely spoke her words according to script, and I likewise. "Heavens to Murgatroyd, no!" I exclaimed in startled reflex, tilting back in my chair with hands raised in objection. "I'd never do that. I'm just saying I'm ready to march over there to the president's office, get down on my knees, and beg them to take my case. This is wrong what they did, and it needs to be rectified somehow. Say, with an attorney who'd at least counsel me on representing myself through the entire process, including the trial if it comes to that." And I finished with, "To put it succinctly, I really, really, really don't want to be my own lawyer, if at all possible." She then reached out to a thick binder, obese with countless pages sealed in plastic and about 8 tabs sticking out to identify the categories. As she opened it, she declared, "Surely there's some organization out there that would be glad to take your case." I explained to her, all the ones I've looked up that do pro bono for the poor don't include personal injury, except for the SF Bar. For example, I contacted legal assistance for the elderly last week over the phone. They asked me my case number, looked it up, and replied, "We're sorry, but we don't handle personal injury lawsuits." I see," she replied. "Are you disabled?" I knew where this would lead, so told her, "Yes, schizophrenia. But the legal services for the disabled also don't deal with personal injury cases. I've already checked that out, and besides, they usually focus on the physically handicapped and ignore mental nut jobs like me." Upon hearing that, she looked up from her beastly tome and quipped, "Speaking of mental health, Ezekiel, you certainly have a healthy sense of humor." "I like to think so, yes, thank you very much," I quipped back. "I have learned to tame my schizophrenia and channel it into creative outlets, and humor played a major role in getting me there. All without taking soul-sucking psychotropic medication of any kind." Then I held up both arms like a bodybuilder showing off his biceps and declared, "Brain now strong like bull." I explained further I seem to have exhausted all possible resources out there to find a legal organization that will handle my case pro bono. The only one I found is the SF Bar. I'm perfectly eligible for pro bono, and they do advertise their dedication to serving the poor and disadvantaged at no cost, and other legal outfits promote them as such. Even my eviction attorney recommended them to me and said they'll take my case pro bono, so it makes sense for the SF Bar to take me on board. But I don't know how I can persuade them to do that after what they put me through. I can't afford to keep shelling out $35 a pop to speak with one lawyer after another, only to wind up being turned down by each one anyway. I then paused for a moment, sighed, and added, "So that's why I'm here." Upon listening to my heartfelt spiel, she finally closed that cumbersome volume of legal schlock and shoved it aside. "Besides which," I resumed, "it's too late for me to keep looking. The deadline to reply is only 5 days from now. I'm already prepared to register and deliver my general denial this Monday, come hell or high water. Then, and only then, after that's been accomplished, I'll continue seeking out an attorney, at least one who will counsel me, if not outright represent. Showing up in person at SF Bar headquarters and begging them is definitely on my agenda. Sidebar. At this point, I should remind you, Watson, as I've already stated in a previous missive, that LARC is an extension of the SF Bar, which makes my dilemma that much more interesting, eh? We can do this, Ezekiel, she proclaimed. I think the best solution at the moment is have you speak with a personal injury attorney right now. Yes, that would be a great start, I exclaimed. His name is Prentice, she replied, but he's counseling another client, so it'll be 10 minutes or so before you can speak with him. Does that work for you? It sure does, I replied in gratitude. As I stood up to return to a waiting chair along the wall, she said, I'm sorry you're going through this. It must be painful. No, not at all, I reassured her. I take the Buddhist stance, though such an approach is taught in other philosophies as well, that one must never allow anger or any other negative emotion to rule your world. Another way of saying that is we have no enemies, only teachers. So I will be fine no matter what, no matter how I beat this lawsuit, and beat it I shall. It's all good, and just an adventure for me where I get to meet incredible folks along the way, such as yourself. And with that, she nodded and walked away to confer with Prentice while I returned to my seat near the corner. To be continued next week at approximately this time of the night or early morning, as they say.